Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and today Apple released iOS 17.2 RC. iOS 17.2 Release Candidate, or GM is what they used to call it, or Golden Master, is available to developers and public beta testers on all iOS 17 supported devices, from the iPhone XS, XS Max, and all the way up to the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max. Now this is a feature-packed update, and this came in at 6.39 gigabytes on my 15 Pro Max. It was about the same size on all the devices here, and release candidates typically are large as you're installing the final version that releases to the public as long as there's no additional issues. So this should be the final version that was released alongside many other updates such as iPadOS 17.2 RC, watchOS 10.2 RC, and even older updates such as iOS 16.7.3 or older devices. Now, if you're a beta tester wondering how to get to the public version, all you'll need to do when it comes out is turn off your beta updates. If there's no additional updates in RC2, for example, you'll just have the final version early. If there is an RC2, you'll see the update when it comes out to the public, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now let's take a look at the build number and talk about what's new. So we'll go to Settings, then General, then About, and as you can see, the build number is 21C62. This is the final build, like I said, unless there's an additional issue they find with it, and we'll talk about bugs and things a little bit later. As far as a modem update, if you're on beta 3 or beta 4, you'll have the same modem version. If you're on a previous version, you'll have a new modem update, or if you're updating from the public version when it comes out, it will have a new modem update. Now there's tons of new features, and the first one they actually didn't mention in their notes, which has to do with default alert tones. If you go into your settings, go into Sound and Haptics, scroll down, you'll see there's a new option for default alerts. This lets you change the default alert tone from one you didn't like before or whatever you have to a new one. If we go into it, you'll see we have the option for haptics where we can change that, as well as our sound here as well. If we scroll down, we have all of these different options: handoff, milestone, and more. And then at the bottom, we have classic with all of the old ones as well. So there's a default ringtones that can finally be changed, or tones in general, something that we've wanted for a long time, and they've finally updated. Now, the next thing you may already be familiar with, but this is a new app completely called Journal. The Journal app is installed once you install iOS 17.2, and it allows you to journal based on things such as your visit to different places, songs you listen to, and more. It will give suggestions, and you can turn off this information if you don't want a lot of it shared, or you can turn it off entirely, but you have a lot of nice updates here. Of course, you can add your own journal entry, and then it will give suggestions. You also have some settings for Journal as well. So if you scroll down, you'll see a new entry here for Journal, and within Journal, you can allow Journal to access Face ID, as you can actually lock your journal in general, something they should bring to other apps. You also have the option to skip journaling suggestions. Again, you can lock it here. You have a journaling schedule, and then you can save media to photos. So you can disable this if you don't want to use any of it, or just turn it all off, or allow whatever works for you. Now, as far as music, there's some updates here, but there's something they didn't include this time around that we saw in some of the betas, such as the collaborative playlist. So the collaborative playlist is gone, but if you made one in previous betas, it will still exist. You just won't be able to modify it or change it in any way. So that will probably be with iOS 17.3 or something later on. However, there is a favorite songs playlist that they've added here. So if we go into our playlist, you'll see favorite songs, and you'll see all of your different favorite songs that you've used throughout the years, or whenever you've listened to it. So anything that you star as favorite will show up here. So that's really nice that it's here. And also, if you go into a focus mode, there's a new option for music. And within focus, if maybe you go into a focus mode, whether that's do not disturb or something else, scroll down. Under focus filters, you now have the option for music, and then you have use listening history. So it says choose if music played will influence recommendations and mixes, appear in recently played, or be shown to others on Apple Music. So if you want to use that, just enable it. If not, leave it off. If you have an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max with the action button, there's a new option for that. If we go into settings, within settings, go down to action button, you'll see if we scroll over, we have a translate option. And this actually looks really nice when it's running. So if I press and hold, it's listening, and you can see that new option here where it looks great. So let me do that one more time, press and hold. It has a great animation where it's listening, and that's something entirely new. I typically just use flashlight, but if you want to use translate, it's there. Now also in the camera, there's some updates. So if we go into settings, we go back, scroll down to camera, there's a new option. In camera, if we go to Formats, scroll down, you'll see that we have a new option for spatial video for Apple Vision Pro. Now, this may not be available on all devices, but basically it records spatial video with remarkable depth for viewing in photos on Apple Vision Pro. And it says for best results, keep it in landscape. And if you go into your Photos app and you have that enabled, we go into the video mode here and turn it sideways. You can see there's a new spatial video option. Turn that on and it will record spatial video, but it's telling me to move farther away. So if you want to record that, you'll be able to use it later if you plan to use an Apple Vision Pro. If you do record with spatial video, it actually will let you view it here just like it was a normal video. So if we press record here, you'll see it says move farther away. It records it. You can watch it back just like we have before, as always, but you won't see it in spatial video. You'll be able to use that with Apple Vision Pro once it releases. Additionally, on the iPhone 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max, they've actually improved the telephoto camera focusing speed. So if you're using telephoto, whether that's the 5x telephoto or something else, such as the 3x on the Pro, the focus speed should be greatly improved. So if we move over here, move back, it seems to focus nice and quick. So that's something they've updated here. Messages get some updates. So if we go into Messages, and they finally brought the arrow that allows you to catch up on a conversation. You won't actually see it unless you have a bunch of different messages, whether you're in a group text or something else, but it will bring you back to where you actually left off once you exited the app last time. So if you exited, someone messages you a bunch of times, you go back in, there will be an arrow here, tap it, and it brings you back to where you left off. Again, it takes a while to show up, and there needs to be a certain amount of messages as well. You can also add sticker options in the context menu where you actually can add it directly to a bubble. So you can add a sticker here this way now and add a reaction directly to this where you couldn't do it before. You could bring it in from the bottom before, but you couldn't just reply with a sticker. So that's something they've updated as well. So if I want to just bring that in, we can tap on it and reply. If we're in Memoji and we're editing it, we now have a new option for body. Now this is probably for Apple Vision Pro, but you can see all of the different options for chest, shoulders, arms, and waist. So you can adjust this however you'd like so that it fits your profile overall. So whatever works for you, set it up that way. It's available now if you use Memoji. They've also added sensitive content warnings for stickers, where before this was here with different photos, where it could warn you if it had something that it thought it might be inappropriate. It does it all on device. You can enable or disable it if you want to, but it just works with stickers now. It's found under Settings, Screen Time, and under Screen Time, if you scroll down, you'll see Communication Safety. If you go under that, you can turn that on or disable it. So if you want to turn it on, you have a child or something else, you can actually enable it there. They've also finally brought contact key verification to Messages. It can be enabled directly in the Messages app, or if you tap on your name in Settings at the top, then under your Apple ID, scroll to the bottom, you'll actually see contact key verification. Within this, if you try and turn it on, it'll bring you through what it actually does, where it verifies that who you're speaking with is who they actually say they are based on your contacts. They can enable this as well, but you do need to have all of your devices updated for this to work. So I'll have to go through and do that, or you can remove them. So we'll just tap OK and exit out of that. Now you may have already noticed that I have a new widget here. They've added some new widgets, not only for weather, but also another one. So if we go in and maybe add a widget here, scroll down, under weather, you'll see there's a new widget. So we have our original widgets, but then we have some new ones called Details, Daily Forecast, as well as Sunrise and Sunset. So those are new. There's also a new clock widget as well. And under clock, you'll see clock digital. So if you want a digital clock now, you have that option. So they finally brought that here. I know a lot of people have been wanting that. Now, if we go into weather, there's some updates here as well. Not only do we have our 10-day forecast, but within this, maybe we pick a day. If we switch to precipitation, we have some updates here where it shows the next 10 days and it gives more information. So if there's some information here, you'll see it here along with different options for units with inches and millimeters. Additionally, if we scroll down, you'll see new information for things such as wind. So we can go in and see information about wind with a forecast there, with a snapshot that helps you quickly assess that here. And also they have an interactive moon calendar. So you'll see that here where we go in and we have the calendar where it's interactive. So it shows all the different phases and more. So some really nice updates to weather. It's my #1 go-to weather app right now. Apple's also improved AirDrop with something they actually said would be here with the initial release of iOS 17, but they've added some more things as well. If we go into our settings, go to General and then AirDrop, we now have the option to use cellular data when out of range. So if you want to do that, we can then extend that. So maybe you're sharing with someone and you need to walk away, you can do that. And then also they'll allow you to share more information, such as boarding passes, movie tickets, and other passes by just bringing two phones together using the overall sharing, such as name drop. So if you want to do that, that option is there. Something we weren't expecting with this update is Apple brought wireless charging support for the Qi 2 wireless charging standard to iPhone 13 and iPhone 14 models. Unfortunately, it won't be available on iPhone 12 models, but it will be on 13 and 14. That means it will have support for possibly faster charging and then different chargers that align themselves better with magnets. So not just MagSafe, but the standard can roll out to things such as Android as well, where they're all just the same sort of wireless charging that is more efficient and again has wireless charging capability at a faster rate. So it will have magnets like we have on the iPhones, on all phones, and just sort of be standardized across everything, much like USB-C is now. Also, they've updated PDFs a little bit. So if you have a PDF, we'll go into a PDF and maybe it has information in there. It will now autofill or identify things where it can autofill fields. This is something that was promised with iOS 17, and it will recognize different information such as names and addresses from your contacts and help you autofill those fields. So I'll show that more in the release video of this as well. Apple's also added some new keyboard support. So if we go into settings and then we go to general and then we scroll down to keyboard and then maybe add a keyboard here. So we'll add a new keyboard. They've added support for Sami keyboards. Hopefully I'm saying that properly, but you'll see those here. So Inari, Kilden, and more. So that's available now. Also, they've updated Siri to be able to access health information. This is something I showed with watchOS 10.2 betas a couple betas ago, and you can now ask for health information. So how many steps did I walk yesterday? And it tells me how many steps directly from health data. Now this can be disabled as well, but it's privately accessing and logging health data now. You can actually log your weight. Log my weight, 250 pounds. And there you go. It logs your weight and updates the health app with that information across iPhone and Apple Watch as well. Additionally, there's some bug fixes in this update. Now, there's not as many as we would have thought. In fact, they only shared one where it fixes an issue that could prevent wireless charging in certain vehicles. I'm pretty sure we think that's GM and maybe Lincoln and others, as many people, after they fixed the issue with wireless charging in BMW getting too hot on the iPhone 15s, it stopped charging in things such as GM vehicles. So that should be fixed now. Hopefully it will charge properly through the cable as well, as some people were having that issue. They have not mentioned anything as far as the notification bug, so you'll see here it's still there. Additionally, there's issues with the wallpaper dimming. So if you watch the wallpaper, as I slide off the lock screen, it sort of dims. I've submitted that in the feedback apps. Hopefully they'll support that in the future. And then also there's no mention of a Wi-Fi fix or anything else. Now, I haven't had issues with Wi-Fi with Beta 4, but we won't know for a few days, so we'll have to check that on the weekend with the regular follow-up and see if it's been resolved, but they haven't mentioned it at all. There's also security updates in this update as well, but we won't know about those until it's released to the public, as they never update the website until that point. Now, as far as the overall performance, so far it's been nice and fast, nice and smooth. Beta 4 had a similar experience, no issues whatsoever, and the same is true on iPhone 11. I noticed it was nice and smooth, no issues going into different apps, whether that be maybe the TV app. Maybe we'll have a splash screen here, nothing there. Apps just seem to open nice and fast. Going into the app library and scrolling works well, and ProMotion is nice and fast as well here also. So I really haven't noticed any differences, not from Beta 4 yet, but we'll check that on the weekend and see what it's like after we've used it for a few days. As far as the overall heat of the device, well, it was a little bit warm using it initially after installing, but it did install a whole update, and I did run benchmarks, and we'll check that in a moment. But let's take a look at the heat of it. You'll see we're at about 28 to 29 degrees Celsius, or about 86 degrees Fahrenheit or so, give or take, depending on what you're doing with it. But I've been holding the phone this entire time. It's now cooled down quite a bit. And as far as overall battery performance, well, it's hard to say, as we'll need to use this for a few days, but let's take a look at the overall cycle count and what the battery's like. Currently, I'm at 61 cycles. Now, some people are actually seeing this drop down to 99% battery health, which if you do the math based on what Apple says, after about 25 cycles, it could drop 1%. However, mine hasn't yet over 60 cycles, so it's still at 100%. And using beta 4, just yesterday, I had 3 hours and 12 minutes of screen active time, 2 hours and 1 minute of screen idle time, and used about 50% of my battery. Today, so far, 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I've used 30% of my battery. Hopefully, this really fixes the battery issues many of us have had, but again, we'll have to check that on the weekend. Now, if you're wondering if you should install iOS 17.2 RC, if you're on any of the iOS 17.2 betas, I would definitely install it, as this should be the final version unless there's additional issues that they fix. And then, of course, iOS 17.2 will probably release most likely on Monday. That's typically when we have updates. We could have an RC2 toward the end of the week, but typically we'll have a public release usually on Monday or maybe Tuesday, but around the 11th. Last year it was on the 13th, so we could see it early in next week. As far as iOS 17.3 Beta 1, again, we could see it later in that week or the following week, with no updates to Beta 2 typically until the second week of January. So that's usually what they do. Now, I did run initial benchmarks, and they're going to be a little bit low, as I ran it right after installing the update and had 2,913 for single core, 7,062 for multi-core. If we take a look at the history, you'll see it's a little bit higher for single core and a little bit lower for multi-core. If I run this again on the weekend, I would expect this to bump up a little bit after it's done processing everything in the background. Now, there is more features to cover in this update, little things here and there that I'll cover in the final release video, but that's everything that Apple says is installed in this as far as the update goes. No collaborative playlist, which is a bit odd. Let me know if you've found anything else they haven't mentioned in their notes as well. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, and I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do. If you haven't subscribed already though, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.